15 chapters of the book of Revelation today. And just remind ourselves of what it's about. So,
I got pens today.
when Jesus was here on earth, he looked at the temple that they were worshiping in and said, this temple is going to be thrown down. And the disciples said, well, when's that going to happen? And he kind of gave them a little hint. And well, they asked him a couple of questions. When's that going to happen? When's the temple going to be thrown down? What will be the sign of your coming? And what will be the sign of the end of this age that we're living in? So Jesus answered those questions, but they didn't understand that he was not coming back immediately, that there would be a time period before he came back. So he gave some answers to what was going to happen right then. He gave some answers to what was going to happen thousands of years later. And then the signs of the end of the age. And so, sure enough, that temple was thrown down in 70 AD. The temple was destroyed. And by 120 AD, all the Jews had been scattered throughout the world. And remained scattered until about 70 years ago, that 1948. 1948. Yes, in 1948, they declared Israel a country again, and the Jews gathered back in Israel. So, a lot of things that Jesus said couldn't happen until Israel came back as a nation. A lot of the prophecies of the Revelation involved the nation of Israel, and for a couple thousand years, it felt like an irrelevant book. Like, all this stuff going on in the book of Revelation, and wars, and false prophets, and false messiah. When's that ever going to happen? Well, starting in 1948, when Israel became a nation, that triggered the fact that she's calling to ask, are you taping the, recording the lesson? Oh, it's telemark. That's how they are. So, to put it on the airplane mode, you know how to do this?
But then we'll not be able to record.
Yeah, you can still record, you just won't get any phone calls.
No interruption.
Right? Okay, so in but you may not know how to do it. I know I have been taught 5 times. So in 1948, when Israel became a nation, then suddenly the book of Revelation became relevant again. So John has a vision, and an angel appears to him and says, I want you to write down these words, because I want to tell you how this world is going to come to an end. What's going to be the signs. And so we're going to begin, we're going to go through 15 chapters and have a review today. We're going to zip through. I just felt moved to do it that way. So Revelation chapter 1, verse 3. Introduction and the benediction.
Blessed is he who reads, and those who hear the words of this prophecy, and keep those things which are written in it, for the time is near.
For the time is near. So it's even nearer now. So he gives greetings to 7 churches. The 7 churches are 7 types of churches that exist today, that exist in all times. There's always 7 types of churches that exist. And so we want to make sure that we're one of these churches, but not the other 6. So, Revelation chapter 1, verse 4.
John to the...
7 churches which are in Asia.
So Revelation chapter 2, verse 1, verse 4, and 5.
To the angel of the church of Ephesus.
Ephesus.
Right.
Same thing.
I know your works. Nevertheless, I have this against you, that you have left your first love.
So he says to the church of Ephesus, I know your works, you do a lot of great stuff, but you've left your first love. You used to be all about evangelism and going out and winning souls, but once your church got full, you stopped doing that and just started having a lot of annual days. Nobody got saved. Okay, nobody did. Right. So it's okay to have an annual day, but if the only purpose is to raise money, and it's okay to raise money because you have to turn on the lights and have the air conditioning. So the church needs money. It's not like the money's bad. But that the only purpose, if we're not winning souls, Jesus says, I'm kind of mad at you because you left your first love. So make sure you return to your first love. That's the successful church. The persecuted church, Revelation chapter 2, verse 8, part of 9 and 10.
The angel of the church in Smyrna writes, I know your works, tribulation, and poverty, but you are rich.
So you've gone through a lot of tribulation. You're kind of poor, but actually you're rich. How can you be poor and rich? Spiritually rich. Give people a chance to think, young lady. People who just yell out in class like I used to always do. And my teacher had to put a gag in my mouth, put me in the clothes closet, because I answered questions for everybody. Hallelujah. But if I know the answer, I'm going to tell it. So anyway, yes, spiritually rich. You can be poor financially, but spiritually rich. And which is like more important when you stand before God. What will get you into heaven, your money or your spirit? Right, your spiritual connection to Jesus. So he doesn't, great, you're poor now, but I really know you, he says, that you're actually rich. So don't stop what you're doing. He says to that church.
Do not fear any of those things which you are about to suffer.
Why didn't he say, I'm going to protect you from things that you're about to suffer, so that you won't suffer them? Do you have any questions?
Because, suffering actually can glorify, not just people say, hey, you're still joyful, and then through suffering, it can also mold you into where God wants you to make you stronger.
But isn't there a philosophy today in the church that Christians are never supposed to suffer?
No.
And just be rich and successful and happy all the time?
That's not biblically foundational.
But I hear that all the time on the television. Now, it's not like God wants everybody poor. That's not God's will. But suffering of various types actually produces patience. God is concerned about our character. And a lot of my friends who are rich, I wish they would just give me money. But it's their money, they earn it, so they get to keep it. But they have children that are spoiled, and they're very confused now why the children are so crazy. My friends came from poor families, and they made really great decisions. They worked their butts off and made a lot of money. Their children haven't had to work at all because their parents were already wealthy, and their children are all nuts. And my friends went, what happened? And one of them said, I should have made them mow the lawn. I should have made them do laundry. He said, I messed up. I never made them. So now the kid sits around waiting for somebody to call him up and hand him a job. Because he was never taught that he had to work. Does that make sense? He was never taught, because everything was handed to him. So he's been offered a couple jobs, but they're not the top job at the agency, so he's turned them down. Now, some of us, please offer me a job. I'll take the low job at the agency. But so there's some merit to suffering. So God wants to shape our personality. So some of the things we're going through, they're good for us because they shape us and who we are. Some of the things we're going through, it's our fault that we're going through them. It has nothing to do with God trying to shape our personality. We just made dumb mistakes. And that's okay because God teaches us a lesson from that too. So to this persecuted church, he says, don't be afraid of the things you're about to suffer. They're actually going to be good for you. The compromising church, Revelation chapter 2, verse 12, 13, 14.
And to the angel of the church in Pergamos, write, I know you dwell where Satan's throne is. You have there those who hold the doctrine of Balaam. Balaam.
So he says, your church is actually where Satan's throne. You have a church in Las Vegas. You got a church in New York. You got a church, right next to the strip joint. He says, I know.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
However, there's some people who go to your church who hold the doctrine of Balaam. Balaam thought he could serve God and then bring whores into the church and have sex with them and then turn around and serve God. So he's living in two worlds.
Oh, wow.
He says, some of you hold the doctrine of Balaam. You think you can do both. As long as I go to church on Sunday and shout, then I can go on Monday. I can do what I want. So he said, be careful. Because I'm going to destroy you. Because you can't do both. You can't serve two masters. Tell him again. Amen. You can't serve two masters. Literally, it's not like God doesn't want you to. You only can serve one master. You can pretend like you're serving God, but the master you're really serving is drugs or whatever. That's actually your master. because it tells you what to do. And when to go and when to stop, and make you leave work early and go off and sneak off and do stuff. So that's your master. So he said you literally can't serve two masters. You're pretending. However, there's the corrupt church where they're not even pretending. Revelations 2, 18, 23, 28.
To the angel of the church in
Thyatira.
Right, you allow that woman Jezebel, who calls herself a prophetess, to teach and seduce my servants.
So you allow Jezebel to take over your church. And she's teaching just totally corrupt, totally bad things. They're not even pretending to be righteous and be bad. You let Jezebel take over. So that's the totally corrupt church. There's no good in it. You walk in the church, no sign of Jesus anywhere. Nowhere. And listen, Jezebel's not always talking about prostitution or something like that. Now, I'm going to make up a church. I'm not talking about any particular church. I'm just making up a church. But you can go into a church and walk by the swimming pool and the tennis courts and go inside, and the sermon is all about living your best life, and you never hear the word Jesus once.
Yes, sir.
That's Jezebel. Jezebel's taking over. Anything that distracts from Jesus. You understand? So people are going to that church because it's a country club. Not because they're being called on spiritually to change their lives, to do good, to love one another. They're just going there because it's a great self-help seminar. Jesus is just as bad, just as angry at that church. Then there's the, yes sir. No, Jezebel's not just a woman. Jezebel's just the idea that she's teaching something that's the opposite of what Jesus is teaching. It's not always obvious sin. It can disguise itself, but it still has nothing to do with the doctrine of Jesus Christ. And there's a lot of churches that can fall into that trap, that want to entice members so badly, they never tell them to stop sinning. They never tell them you need to change your life. They don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. Come to this church. This is a feel-good church. You walk in and we'll tell you how much God loves you and how great your life is going to be, and He wants you to be a millionaire. And it could be a Tony Robbins seminar. There's no difference. It's a Tony Robbins seminar being held inside of a church. So Jezebel is anything that is taking over your church, that is steering you away from God. Then there's the dead church.
And to the angel of the church in Sardis, right, I know your works, that you have a name, that you are alive, that you are dead. Spend in the things which remain.
See, you have a name that you're alive, because you're the first church of Jesus Christ of Nazareth. Are you the Holy Bethel Church of God in Christ? In Him we trust. I mean, you've got a great name. Some people, I drive by the churches, the church is bigger, the name of the church is bigger than the church. They can barely fit it on the, the 6 members inside, but they've got this incredible name. So you got a name that you're alive, but you're actually dead. There's nothing going on in this church. So there's the dead church, and there's the lukewarm church.
And to the angel of the church of the Laodiceans write, I know your works, that you are neither cold nor hot. So then, because you are lukewarm and neither cold nor hot, I will vomit you out of my mouth.
So this is the worst church. Because the dead church, He can set on fire. At some point, the dead person looks around and goes, we're dead. So what? Yes, we're dead. But the lukewarm church is you're not cold, you're not hot, you're not anything. And that's the one He says, I'm going to vomit you out of my mouth because I cannot get to you. It is better that you cut them loose and let them go into do what they want to do and find out and hit their head against the wall. And then they'll wake up.
Amen.
Hey, you need prayer?
Lay hands. He's going to lay hands.
You were hitting your knee against the table just when I said that. So, sometimes it's good to go ahead and let Aiden hit his head against the wall, and then he'll learn a lesson. Right? But the people that you keep dragging to church and they don't want to go, you're keeping them lukewarm.
You better say it.
Let them go. They'll figure out like the prodigal son. They'll be eating with pigs soon enough. And then they'll want to come back because they want to come back. If people's salvation depends on what you want for them, it's not real salvation. So they're just lukewarm. They kind of have one foot in and one foot out. I'd rather you were cold than to be lukewarm. Then there's the faithful church.
And to this angel of the church in Philadelphia, right? Because you have come my command to persevere, I also will keep you from the hour of trial which shall come.
So because you've kept persevering, you've kept doing what I told you to do, I'm actually going to keep you from the hour that's to come. So we want to be that kind of church because there is coming an hour. He's warning them. If you're any of these other types of churches,
Bless you.
if we are any of these other type of churches, we're going to be susceptible when the Antichrist comes, when the false Messiah comes. He'll be able to lure all these other churches into following him. The only church that will be protected is the faithful church, the one that's still just keeping his nose to the grindstone. I've never seen a grindstone. I don't know where that phrase comes from. You think it hurt your nose. But anyway, you keep your nose to the grindstone and you just keep doing what God tells you to do. And not looking around to see what everybody else is doing, but what is God telling us to do. So that's the first vision. John has a vision of these 7 churches that he'll give messages to. Then in Revelation chapter 4, he has a vision of the throne room of heaven. And in next to the throne is the living creature. Someone read that verse 7.
The first living creature was like a lion. The second living creature like a calf. The third living creature had a face like a man. And the fourth living creature was like a son of man.
This is something we've never seen before. It's an angel with 4 faces. One was like a lion, like a calf, like a man, and like an eagle. So wherever direction it looked, it was always looking at you. Does that make sense? One of those things. And these are the creatures around God on purpose to let us, when they want to get this vision, God sees everything. Everything. You can't go into the liquor store, God didn't see you. These are one of the face like a lion. That represents, and these all represent the type of ministry of Jesus. He was the king. The second was like a cat. He was the servant. The second had a face like a man. That means he feels sorrows like we do. And the fourth was like an eagle, which represents his spiritual ascendancy above us all. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John each address one of those 4 types of Jesus. Matthew was always proving to the Jews that he was the king of the Jews. Mark was always proving to the Romans that he was a servant like that bull. So if you read Mark, he's doing stuff always. He's just helping people. Every chapter, every other verse, Jesus is out healing people. Luke wanted to know that he was a man who understood us. So Luke appealed to the Greeks and explained that Jesus understood. So all the parables, a lot of the parables are in Luke because he's appealing to us, he's talking to us. And so Luke is full of Jesus explaining who he is so that we can relate to him. And John is written to the new Christians. And so in John we get Jesus, his spiritual side, where he says, the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us, and I give you water from the well that you cannot drink. Those who worship me must worship me in spirit and in truth. He gives us a lot of spiritual truths in the book of John. And so this creature is next to the throne. And then the Lamb stands up. Revelation chapter 5, verse 1.
And I saw in the right hand of him who sat on the throne a scroll written inside it and on the back, sealed with 7 seals.
So it was written on the inside and on the back. And it was sealed with 7, so it was a scroll. That's the type of books they had. They didn't have books like we have today. Everything was written on a scroll. So he has a scroll and it's written on the inside and on the outside. Why is it written on both sides? What? Not just a lot to say, but it's totally full. If you take, what? Right, you can't put anything else. So this book, if it's written here and here and here and here, then it's totally full, right? Then it would be totally full. And it's written on the inside and out. As they're unrolling the scroll, it's written on both sides because it's saying this is the complete history of everything that is going to happen. So when we read the book of Revelation, he goes from Jesus' time all the way to the end of time. This is the total history, and there's 7 seals. And as he undoes each seal, he undoes a new chapter going through time. So these are the 7 seals and what happened as each seal was broken. Starting the first seal conquest, Revelation chapter 6, verse 2.
Behold,
So a white horse, when he unleashed the first seal, a white horse went out. The white horse represents, since Jesus' time, the desire in man to conquer and control other nations. So people went out and began to conquer consistently, year after year, other nations, and to control men and to enslave them. Now, why is he unleashing these? Before I get into it, he wants to warn us about the end. He's going to allow man to get worse and worse. So, stand up, son. I really apologize. So, lean toward there like you're going to fall. I got you, though. Right? I got you. I got you. This is Jesus. He's got us.
amen.
We're falling. It's only him that's holding us up. But when he unleashes the seal, he's not holding us up anymore. Right? So he's going to, so as each seal is broken, he's going to allow our worst impulses to come out. So that we'll cry out for him eventually. Because simply sending Jesus apparently wasn't enough. Having him die on the cross, apparently that wasn't enough. So he has to say, okay, I'm going to let you fall into your sin. So maybe then you'll cry out to me. So first, that conquest. When people are enslaved, they'll look up and cry out. We need a God. The second seal was war, Revelation chapter 6 through 4.
Another horse, fiery red.
So then nations will now begin to attack. There'll be wars and rumors of wars and more and more. There used to be war every 300-400 years. Then every 100 years. Then every 50 years, then every 20 years, then every 10 years. And now there's always a war going on somewhere. We're so numb to it. There's wars going on, we don't even care anymore. In North Africa, they're fighting. All in the Middle East, we're in constant war. Yes, ma'am.
What was the first seal again?
The white horse.
Okay,
The white horse,
conquer.
that's conquest. That's the desire to conquest. This young lady is going to teach this.
Amen.
That's why she's taking notes. Seriously.
I like to know good myself.
That's right. Okay. The fiery red represents war. The third seal, famine, Revelation 6:5.
Behold the black horse.
This is scarcity of goods. So more and more there'll be famine throughout the world. Whole regions wiped out. The fourth seal, sickness, Revelation 6-8.
Behold the pale horse.
In this chapter, there's war, there's hunger, and also disease. Will we see more diseases? Coronaviruses and SARS just kind of loosed on the earth? Yes. Because of man's wickedness. It's not God sending disease. Some of these diseases came from men doing unnatural things with animals and stuff. So I'm just telling you where some of these diseases have come from. Our own wickedness has created these diseases. It's not God sending disease on the earth. He was actually holding it back.
Switch with me.
But he takes his hand off so that we cry out for him. Because without him, we're susceptible to these things. So, disease, famine. These are all warnings from God that the end is coming. Then the fifth, now we have to take a good look at the fifth, sixth, and seventh trumpet. They're very important. The fifth seal, the cry of the martyrs, Revelation 6, chapter 10, the second part of verse 10, the second part of verse 11.
How long, O Lord, holy and true, until you judge and avenge our blood?
So they looked, and he looked, and there were martyrs sitting around underneath the throne, it says. These are all the people who are worshiping God, who've been keeping their eye on the Lord, and have been killed because they refused to disavow God. They refused to say, no, he's not my Savior. Now, we're not in that position today. We act like we are. When I watch Christian television, we think people are running. But we're sitting here, no one's attacking us. There are people who lived in times where if you say I'm a Christian, they can kill you. We don't live in that time. We pretend like we do. But we have Christian stations everywhere and churches everywhere. We don't live in that time. It's kind of great people who actually did live in those times. But there's coming a time again where that will be true. And then we'll find out who the true Christians are. So the country club kitchens are going to have trouble. Because when it's no longer safe to go to the church that has a swimming pool and a tennis court, will they still say I'm a Christian? Yes, sir.
Isn't that happening around the world right now? Like popular Christians are being killed by those.
There are pockets of it. We exalt that there's 4 billion people on the earth. We exalt, we exaggerate. There's coming a time when it will be widespread, period, on the earth, widespread. Right? So, yes, a lady got the coronavirus, passed it on to her husband somewhere. That didn't affect the rest of the United States. We can watch the news and we're all, oh my God, but there's coming a time when you will be affected, where disease will affect you. Does that make sense? There's coming a time when no matter where you go, you say, I'm a Christian. So I'm not saying, there have been times when that was it for Christians. Universal, not just in small pockets. So that's the 5th seal. The 6th seal. Go ahead.
And so both the number of their fellow servants and their brethren who would be killed as they were listening.
So how long? There is a number in God's mind. I'm going to let 100,000 get killed, 200. Again, he's stepping back and allowing the evil wickedness of men to take over. He gives them a chance to repent. He sends out people and says, stop doing that. There are people on street corners with megaphones. You need to repent. And people drive by laughing at them. But there's coming a time when God's going to finally step back in and say, okay, time's up. I did everything you could. There was a church in the corner, right? So he allows the wickedness of man. And so they're saying, how long? So there's a time, he says, until it's full. There's a number in God's mind. And now that's it. No more. He's going to come back and put an end to this world. And there'll be a new heaven and a new earth. Did you have a question? No. No one had a question? Okay. The 6th seal, cosmic disturbances.
Behold, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became like blood, and the stars of heaven fell to the earth.
Okay, so we're going to see meteors falling, and cosmic disturbances, and blackouts, and again, hopefully people will look up and say, there must be a God, because too many people today feel that the earth created, I'll answer in just a second, I'm going to just say, feel like the earth has created itself. Too many scientists, too many people think that when they look at the stars, they think, wow, isn't that amazing that those stars just created themselves? Right? Scientists. Then there are scientists who say, well, that's ridiculous. All of this couldn't have been in a little time, because they actually believe that the entire universe, all the matter that exists was in a little tiny ball, and then it just exploded for some reason, and that's where the stars and the planets came from. They never tell where that matter came from in the first place, but it's easier for them to believe that matter created itself than to believe that there was a God who created it all. So there'll be cosmic disturbances, there'll be amazing things happening in the sky. And some of us will say, well, this is God. And some people say, oh, well, that's just natural. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. You first. You had it.
And I think it's because I'm trying to add food supplies.
Yes, the food supplies. Exactly.
And some people believe in already revelation.
Exactly.
Venezuela already had a step.
Yes. Well, and so through time, as time has progressed, that's what God has said. This stuff's going to start happening more and more. Some people either think we're in the book of Revelation, and we are.
Yeah.
We are in the book of Revelation now. But how close are we to the very end? That's what we're going to determine as we come, as we create. Yes, sir?
Didn't somebody write a book like that?
Yes, a lot of people have written books about this. Yeah, you've heard about it. Yes. There have been several books. You can go to the bookstore, there's a lot of books about it. Was there more question? Yes, ma'am?
No, I was gonna make a comment
Yes.
about Christianity.
Uh-huh.
I heard something in the news, but it says Christians prosecuted even after death. China's cracking down on religious funerals.
Yes. Yeah, people, even when they're Christians being buried, and they're still attacking the funeral, so even after death. Now, unfortunately, fortunately for us, that's limited to China. But
Amen.
there's coming a time where it'll be everywhere. And then you have to decide, even if they're going to kill me, am I going to still confess Christ? He's saying to us in the book of Revelation, hold on, don't give up, don't persevere. Remember, the faithful church was the one, even though oppression is coming, if you persevere, there'll be a crown for you. So don't give up your salvation, because death's going to be coming at you. You'll be threatened. You're going to see all this happening. Please hold on. Yes, ma'am.
The China Prime Minister has made the right thing, and they're going to continue doing so, backing down on all big churches.
Yes. And so our job is to keep spreading the gospel so that that will delay it happening here. The more that we turn a blind eye to what's going on, then it allows the devil to move that much faster.
Yeah. You know, I don't know, but it seems like we become the locust of the earth because we're consuming stuff at an alarming rate. We're like consumers. Like the Bible says, where it was green, and after they come, then it'll be brown.
Right.
It's
Yes, that is us. Especially America. Our place is gigantic. We supersize everything.
Yeah.
We're eating up a lot of the world's resources.
Yeah.
And so we have to listen to God, because God says that's enough on your plate. You don't need thirds and fourths. And I say, but Lord, why did you make the donuts so delicious? That's on you. So the sixth seal, we're still at it. So while these cosmic things are happening, he says people are going to hide, because now they realize we are now in the last of the last days. Jesus is at the door. He's just about to show up. So we're in the last of the last days. So we're not quite there yet, but we may be closer than we think. So here's what will also happen. They'll say, verse 16,
Fall on us and hide us from the face of him who sits on the throne, for the great day of his wrath has come.
so the great day of his wrath has come. In the sixth seal, that's now when Jesus shows up. Things get as bad as they can, and now the day of his wrath has come in the sixth seal. Let's look at the seventh seal.
After these things, I saw...
Wait, oh yeah, I'm sorry. So this is not the seventh seal, but this is in between the sixth and the seventh. Go ahead.
After these things, I saw four angels standing at the four corners of the earth, holding the four winds of the earth, that the wind should not blow on the earth, on the sick, or on any tree.
So, we're still in the sixth seal. We haven't gotten to it yet. Cosmic disturbance, people are hiding, things have gotten as bad as they possibly can. The day of his wrath is finally here. Then he sees four angels holding back. Don't come yet, Lord. Not yet. They're holding back the four winds. Why? Verse 4.
And I heard the number of those who were sealed, 144,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel were sealed.
So there are, and I think this is a symbolic number. I don't know if it's exactly 144,000. But the Jews, God's chosen people, Jesus came to them, gave them the law and the prophets and Moses, and did every sign possible. And then some of them rejected it, some of them believed. Those who rejected are still looking for the Messiah. So they also, there are Jews who are very committed to the Bible. They don't know that the Messiah has come, but they're very committed to the Bible. So when they see these signs happening, they're going to say, this is God doing something. When they hear these false messiahs coming, they're going to say, no, that makes sense. That doesn't make sense according to our Bible. We're not going to believe. They still don't know that it's Jesus. But they're not going to be susceptible to the false messiah. And there's 144,000 of them. This is a symbolic number. It may not, just symbolic. 12,000 of every tribe who are going to be sealed. Now, I don't know if you remember, but when we listed these tribes, the tribe of Dan was left out. Because Dan got into idolatry. So Joseph's tribe actually was split in half, Ephraim and Manasseh. But Dan's tribe got into idolatry and tried to lead all the other tribes into idolatry way back 3,000 years ago. And so a lot of Jewish scholars believe, a lot of Christian scholars believe that there's a purpose for that the Messiah is probably going to come from the tribe of Dan. Because it says, basically from the Jews, is the false, not the Messiah, the false prophet. And so the tribe of Dan kind of disappears into history. And they believe that probably the false prophet will come from the tribe of Dan because it's left out on purpose. It wasn't a mistake. So there are Jews who are being sealed in their forehead. So they're going to resist this false Messiah when he comes to attack Israel. Revelation chapter 8. Now we're to the seventh seal.
When he opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven for about half an hour.
So why is nothing happening in the seventh seal? Just silence. All these other seals, the horse went out, terrible things happened, and plagues. The seventh seal's open, it's just silence. I'm sorry? Actually, that's a good guess. That's a good guess. It's because the seventh seal is God's victory. No more plagues, no more destruction. The seventh seal represents God's victory. It's over now. Once the day of his wrath comes, once he shows up, it's over. It's done. We've all said that, oh, Big Mama's here now, we're in trouble. Right? That person comes and they're going to end it. They end it. So at the end of the sixth seal, God shows up and now there's just peace. There's just peace. Seventh represents God's victory. Now, that's the seventh seal. There's seven trumpets. Verse 6.
So the seven angels who had the seven trumpets prepared themselves to sound.
He's going to start over, and from a different perspective, he's going to describe all these things that are going to happen with these seven trumpets. He's telling the same story. The first trumpet, the vegetation will be struck. In Revelation 8, chapter 7, verse 7.
A third of the trees were burned up, and all green grass was burned up.
You're going to see more fires. Are we seeing more fires?
Yeah.
Just because the earth is heating up. People who say, no, it's not, are wrong. The Bible says it is.
Yes.
The earth is heating up. Because of that, there'll just be more fires. So we should try to do something about it. But we'll be fighting a losing battle. Because of our sin, not because God is burning up the trees, but because we're not listening to him. We're heating up the earth in our wickedness. There's things that we don't want to give up. So we're contributing to the environment being bad because we're greedy and there are things that we don't want to give up. And so the earth is heating up. Again, it's God letting us go. And so because of our wickedness, there's more fires. Second trumpet, the sea struck.
Third of the sea became blood.
So you'll see the creatures in the sea begin to die more and more. There are whole organizations who try to save sea life because of our pollution, right? Because of what we're doing. Sorry. So, but there's going to be, we're killing more of the creatures in the sea. Third trumpet, drinking water becomes poison. Revelation 8:11.
Third of the water becomes wormwood, and many men died in the water.
So we already know about that. So the drinking water in more places will become poison. Again, because of man's wickedness, not because the water is something wrong with the water. So John's seeing this, and John's describing what he's seeing. That people just in the rivers and in the streams near their home are drinking, and now people are dying because the water is poison. The fourth trumpet, the heavens struck. Revelation 8:12.
Third of the sun was struck, third of the moon, and third of the star. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth because of the three angels who were about to sound.
Again, more disturbances in the skies above. So these are all there. These are all warning signs that we've been reading about. And I'm just reviewing what we've been going through, what we've been reading, so that we can maybe see the picture clearer that these are all the warning signs. Now, remember 5, 6, and 7 are always different. 5, 6, and 7 are always different. So Revelation 9, the fifth trumpet, locusts from the bottomless pit. Oh, so he has a vision and a pit opens up and millions of locusts come out. However, what he describes the shape of these locusts. Someone else read? It's not like Mary's a designated reader.
The shape of the locust is like horses prepared for battle.
So these horses, these locusts are huge, like horses prepared for battle, meaning covered with iron. So you've got a first century man describing these flying horses that are covered with armor. He's calling them locusts because they're buzzing, because they have wings, right? And his only description is locust. What else is the description? And their faces?
And their faces were like the faces of men.
Okay, and go on.
Breastplates of iron, and the sound of their wings was like the sound of a chariot.
So these are loud. My theory, this is my theory. This is not in the Bible. This is my theory. Is that these are helicopters. That a person from the first century is looking at a bunch of helicopters filling the sky heading into battle. Because it says the sound of their wings is like chariots. And I cut out the part, it's like 100 horses, and you heard these helicopters are really loud. I think there's a man driving the helicopter. That's why he said it had the face of a man. But it was an armored, like an armored locust. And I showed you a picture of some helicopters, and if you saw them, it looks like a bunch of bugs, to me. So my theory is that John is looking at this time period and trying to describe these flying things which he's never seen before. Right? They didn't have airplanes, obviously, in his day. The only thing that flew and looked like that were locusts. So that's him trying to describe what he's seeing. They're like locusts, but they're really as big as horses. They're covered in iron. They have face of men. He talks about the sting that's in their tails, that they're firing and shooting at men. And to me, that's him describing the day. But God is free to create a giant locust that's as big as a horse. That's big as God can create that. That's just as frightening. If a big, huge locust starts shooting fire at me, that's just as bad as a helicopter shooting at me, right? So he's now describing a war that's taking place. The sixth trumpet, the angel from Euphrates. Oh, I'm sorry. So there are 4 angels that are now in the river Euphrates. Euphrates is the river that all these armies used to cross before they came to attack Israel. So when we're reading through the Old Testament, they would gather at the Euphrates, whether it was the Babylonian army or the Persian army or these different armies. And when they crossed the river Euphrates, that meant Israel was about to be attacked. So he says there are angels who are gathered at the river Euphrates. They're holding back the armies. And then they're just about to loose them. So he gives us the picture of an army that's about to cross the river Euphrates and come and attack Jerusalem, attack Israel. So go ahead. And now the number?
Now the number of the army of the horse was 200 million.
Okay, so there's 200 million. He has them on horses. And that's possible that we'll just stop driving jeeps and stuff like that, and a big army will be on horses. Or that's simply his term for what they were riding, because he says that, and the heads of the horses.
And the heads of the horses were like the heads of lions, and out of their mouths came fire, smoke, and brimstone.
So it's easy. I'm good with giant horses that have heads like lions that are shooting out fire and brimstone, or they could have been jeeps. Not jeeps, but tanks. They could have been tanks. because you know they have those round tops.
Oh, yeah.
And it talks about, again, I cut it out, but it talks about they have a tail in the front and in the back, and they're shooting fire and brimstone. And so if you see these tanks shooting fire basically at people, and if I was John from the first century, I would say there's 2 million of them. They're in these horses, but there's something weird about their faces because they're round and they have tails coming out of their mouths, it said, and shooting fire and brimstone. To me, he was describing a tank. But if 200 million people show up on horses that shoot fire, that's still bad. That's wrong. So in Revelation 5 and 6, I mean in the 5th and 6th seal, in the 5th and 6th trumpet blast, he describes a war that's taking place, armies that are heading toward Israel. So 5, 6, and 7 are always different. 1 through 4 are the warning signs. 5 and 6 describe a war. Remember, we had martyrs who've been killed in this war in the 5th seal. In the 5th trumpet, we had locusts that are attacking man. And in the 6th seal, now there's 200 million people who are about to attack Israel, about to cross the Euphrates. But remember, when you get to the 6th seal, more stuff happens. When you get to the 6th trumpet, there's more stuff that happens. So here's also what's going to be going on when the 6th trumpet sounds. Revelation chapter 11, verse, the 2 witnesses.
And the angel stood saying, rise and measure the temple of God, the altar, and those who worship there.
Now, measure it means put a guard around it. You're marking it and saying, these people are safe. So when he says measure the seal in other places in the Old Testament, that just means you know how you put a circle around something and say, okay, you can't go in there. So we might use chalk when you're playing a game. This area is safe. If I'm in this area, I'm safe, right? Oh, you guys don't play games anymore. But back in the day when we played games, we didn't have phones in our hands all the time. We played games. And you would have a little safe area. You'd mark it out. If you were in that area, you were safe. And that's what he's saying. I want you to measure the temple. Some people think it means a literal temple. I'm looking at Josiah. Some people think that it means a literal temple. I believe he means the temple of his people, the people of God. That they're going to be safe, especially in Jerusalem. Those 144,000 Jews there from all different tribes, other than Dan, who are going to be safe from him. So you can't attack them, it says. But then it goes on to say, but leave out the court which is outside the temple. So the court outside the temple was always reserved for Gentiles. Gentiles are not allowed to go in the temple, but they can always go outside the temple. So this part where the Jews are, they're going to be safe. But the outside, that's for the Gentiles. Go on.
For it has been given to the Gentiles, and they will tread the holy city underfoot for 42 months.
3.5 years. Israel will be occupied. Israel will be occupied by an occupying army for 3.5 years. Go on, verse 3.
And I will give power to my 2 witnesses, and they will prophesy 1,260 days.
That's 3.5 years. So while there's an occupying army in Israel, and Israel is again becoming the focus of world news. In fact, just recently, the president announced a peace plan where they're giving more land to the Israelites, to the Jewish people in Israel. Now, in 1948, the Palestinians lived in that area that's called Israel. There were some Jews, some settlers who were there, but it was mostly Arab that had moved into that, and most of the Jews had been scattered throughout the rest of the world. They were in Poland being persecuted. They were in Russia being persecuted. The Pin on the Roof is written about the Jews who were in Russia and then finally got kicked out of there. They were in Germany. The Holocaust is all about the Jews being persecuted. The Jews have been persecuted wherever they've gone, and they were scattered throughout the world. Very few of them were in Israel. It was mostly Arab-occupied territory. In fact, it was called Palestine. Nation. You don't remember hearing the name Palestine? Yes, ma'am.
mentioned, you kind of read the scriptures for you, and this mention, you talking about Israel Jews. You talking about 6 months and 1 month, because they're Palestinians.
Yes.
And not only that, the Jews have given some space for the Palestinians, but the Palestinians run the whole thing.
Right.
So my friend, interpreted that as the Palestinians supposed to inherit the land and have the Jews have it. How would I do that?
Well, I'll just tell you just the history of the region. That's what I'm giving you right now. So that was the children of Ishmael. Do we know who Ishmael is? Who's daddy? Who's his daddy? Abraham. So Abraham, Isaac, and Ishmael. From Isaac, the Jewish nation comes. From Ishmael, the Arabs come. You want to be careful you don't create an Ishmael in your life. They don't go away. They attack you later. So do what God told you to do. Don't do your own thing. You're stuck with an Ishmael that you're hard to get rid of. So the Ishmaelites were living in that area. The Jews were in Egypt. They weren't the Jews yet, right? But what's his name? Had 12 sons. Abraham, Jacob had 12 sons, and they're growing into a mighty nation while they're in Egypt. So initially, the Arabs were in that. What we call the Arabs, the Ishmael, the descendants of Ishmael were in that area. But God said, "I've given that to the Jews." So when they left Egypt, they went first in the wilderness, then they crossed the Jordan and went and conquered the land that they believed God had given to them. But who was there first?
Palestinians.
Right, the Arabs were there first, but God saying, I'm giving that to you. They held it for a while. They were taken into bondage, into Babylon. The Assyrians conquered them, and then finally when Jesus came, he says, well, I'm kicking you out of this land, but you're going to get it back because you aren't listening to me. And so they were dispersed, and the Arabs filled that land back in, what we know as Israel today. In 1948, the United Nations decided we need a place for the Jews. They've been persecuted everywhere they go. Every country they go in eventually turns and tries to kill them. And the worst was in World War II, during the Holocaust, where they tried to kill up to 5 million Jews. We need a place for them to go. So they sent them back to Israel and had them share the land with the people who were there. God is saying, I'm going to eventually give them back this whole area. Now, the people who were there, like, this is our area. Why do you get to take it? And that's the battle. That's the battle right now. So I'm not saying who gets it or who doesn't. I'm just saying the Jews believe God told them this is their land, and the Palestinians are thinking, but you left for a long time. We took it back, and it's ours. And so that's the argument. Because of that argument, the more land that Israel takes back, the more it upsets the surrounding people, and the more they want to attack them. The Bible describes a time when they are going to attack. So I'm assuming that's because they took more and more and more of the land, right? To the point where everybody's like, we're going to get them now. So that's what I'm assuming when the Bible is telling me. You got to let me get through the whole thing.
I was watching the news last few years, and they have given the Palestinian land and they're going back and forth the scripture
Right.
with the United Nations. And this is where currently you still occupy the place.
Yes. Right. And again, I'm not going to give an opinion about it. I'm just going to tell you what's going to happen. It doesn't matter who I think should have the land. It appears from the scripture that the Jews are going to take more of it, to the point where that will eventually create a war. Where people will now you've taken too much, we are now going to attack you. So I'm just mentioning, recently they were given more land. Or at least in they literally haven't taken it, but there was an agreement reached that saying they get to have more land. This inevitably is going to upset people. So we're getting closer. So I'm not saying the Jews shouldn't take it or they should take it. I'm just saying, when I read the scriptures, At a certain point, God says that you've got the land, and you angels put a circle around them because they're about to be attacked. So something's going to be happening. It could be 5 years from now, 30 years from now, or 2 weeks from now. I don't know. Where the people around them will be upset enough that they'll want to come and attack. But again, if you're God's people, it doesn't matter what your opinion is or what somebody else's opinion is. If God says that belongs to them, then He'll make sure that it happens. He'll make sure.
That's right.
So God's in God's mind, and I know God doesn't have the right to say who should live where because He only made everything. But He's saying, I gave that to them, and I gave you all the whole rest of it. Now, interestingly enough, it's just this small part, right? It really could take the rest of it. But the devil gets in us and says, you got to have that too. Right? All of us. I'm not pointing the finger at arrogant. I'm just saying we're all that way. Where that's why people steal from one another. Something gets in us. You got a radio, I got to have your tennis shoes. I got right? Something gets in us. It's the devil. So there's always punishment. God says that belongs to that person. God made that choice. And so it's up to, He will be the bully who shows up and says, okay, I told you it was theirs, and now I'm showing up. And that's what's going to happen in the 5th or 6th seal. There will be an army invading, and then God's going to show up and end it. Okay, so there are 2 witnesses. While this army is occupying Israel, there are 2 witnesses. We think they're Moses and Elijah, who are witnessing, preaching the gospel, warning everybody. So even as tensions increase and armies are surrounding Israel, and He's going to send 2 witnesses. We're not there yet. There's not an army surrounding Israel, but we're close. I don't know how close though. But when that happens, God will send Moses and Elijah, or 2 people in that same vein, to preach. They will do miracles. People will know these people are sent by God, but will they interpret it that way? Oh, there it is. Will they interpret it that way? Or will they just say, oh, those miracles are fake? So when we watch television, sometimes there is a miracle that's fake. There's somebody who hops out of a wheelchair, and sometimes that's fake, and sometimes that's real. And so we have to trust the Spirit within us to tell us, no, that's a real thing that happened, or that's a fake thing that happened. But the world, if you don't have the Spirit of God, you don't know. So when they see these real miracles coming from these prophets, they're going to just pass it off as fake. Revelation is 12. Now, he doesn't get to the 7th trumpet yet, because there's something special about the 7th seal, there's something special about the 7th trumpet. He says, let me just tell you about the devil and what he's been doing all these years. And there's a vision of a woman, a child, and a dragon. The woman has children, and the woman is, do you remember who the woman is in the vision? The woman is Israel, and all that succession of Jews. The child, though, that Israel's going to give birth to, and I appreciate those of you who are not saying anything. The child that Israel's going to give birth to, who's the child that Israel's going to give birth to? Niece. I don't know, I'm playing with my pen. Who came from the Jews that's really important? Jesus. Martin Luther King. No. Who came from the Jews that's a real important person in the world today? Kind of changed history. And yes! Jesus! Ding, 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 ding. You in the car. No. Okay. So the child is Jesus. Well, who would be the dragon? Who's the dragon who's trying to stop the child from being born? Satan. Satan. Right. Okay, so woman, the child, and the dragon. So you're good at interpreting scriptures. You don't need me. So, Revelation chapter 12, verse 1.
Now a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman, and on her head a garland of 12 stars. Then being with child, she cried out to her and came to her.
The 12 stars are the 12 tribes of Israel. Go on.
behold, a great fiery red dragon, having
Seven heads.
having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 diadems on his head. His tail drew a third of the stars of heaven and threw them to the earth.
So he's describing a third of the angels of heaven actually revolted against God. So they say this is the devil. He led an initial attack against God, a third of the angels. Now, of course, it lasted for 2 seconds. And God kicked him to earth. And Jesus said, I saw Satan fall like lightning to the earth. That fast. You see lightning hit earth, boom. Lightning doesn't come in slow. Satan was kicked instantly to the curb. And he's been trapped here ever since with his angels. Although the angels the demons that are here are not angels. We've all discussed it. So he takes a third of the stars, and they're all thrown to the earth. That's when the devil was kicked to the earth with his angels. Go on, and the dragon.
And the dragon stood before the woman who was ready to give birth.
To Jesus, go on.
To devour her child as soon as it was born.
And when he was not able to stop Jesus from being born, although he tried, right? He tried to kill all the babies and all that stuff. Then he turns his wrath on the Jews. So now we're in the 7th trumpet. So he has 7 heads and 10 horns and 10 crowns. Those are 7 different kingdoms that have at one point captured the Jews. Starting with the Syrians, the Babylonians, the Persians, Iran, Iraq, Turkey, all these different countries that we've kind of gone through have all attacked and occupied Israel. But the 7th one hasn't done it yet. The 7th kingdom. So whoever's going to lead this final attack on Israel, we don't know which of the countries around Israel is going to do it. But actually it won't necessarily be Iraq or Iran. Or because it says it's not one of them. So that leaves a few other countries in mind that it might actually end up being. Okay, now the 7th angel sound.
Then the 7th angel sounded, and there were loud voices in heaven saying, the kingdoms of this world have become the kingdoms of our Lord and of his Christ. He shall reign forever and ever.
So what happens when the 7th trumpet sounds? Then the kingdoms of this world become the kingdom of the Lord, and he's going to reign. So when the 7th trumpet sounds, now he wins. It's his victory. The 7th trumpet is victory, right? Now the kingdoms of this world become the kingdom of our Lord, and he reigns. So the 6th trumpet is where all the bad stuff happens. That's where the worst stuff happens. The 6th seal is where the worst stuff happens. People are killed. But the 7th seal, the 7th trumpet, that's always victory. That's where the kingdom of this world becomes the kingdom of our Lord. Okay, Revelation chapter 13. The beast from the sea represents the Gentile world.
I saw a beast rising out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And on his horns 10 crowns, and on his head a blasphemous name.
So the 7th kingdom that's going to attack Israel, he's going to have 10 other kings with him, 10 other nations with him. One kingdom is going to spearhead it, but he's going to be able to make alliances with 10 other, probably Middle Eastern countries, because the Bible says that he's going to use the other 7, and that's probably Iran, Iraq, from that area, Northern Africa, etc. Go ahead. And I saw on the head, verse 3.
And I saw one of his heads as if it had been mortally wounded, and his deadly wound was healed.
So either a person, the head of a country, is killed and then comes back to life, and everybody goes, oh my goodness, you must be a Messiah, or it's a country itself that seemed to have been dead, that seemed to have had no power, and suddenly gets a nuclear weapon or something. Does that make sense? So some country that we think is dead suddenly comes back and is now powerful. And I was saying earlier when we talked on this chapter, for 2,000 years, the countries in the Middle East were powerless. We weren't paying attention to them. While the rest of the world was getting automobiles and progressing, and they were still riding camels, and were just these backward countries kind of stuck in the 1st century. Then this century happened, the 20th century happened, and these countries suddenly, they discovered oil, in them. And they got nuclear weapons, and these countries in the Middle East that the Bible was talking about suddenly became very powerful. Became very powerful. And the world history now revolves around the Middle East. That it's like a powder keg ready to be lit. Whatever happens in this area that the Bible that these are talking about will affect the rest of the world. Okay, so a dead country will come back to life, or a dead person will come back to life. But here is wisdom, verse 18. Wait, before that. Here is wisdom, verse 18, Revelation chapter 13. Verse 18 says, here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding. Revelation chapter 13, verse 11 to 12, and verse 18, where we just were. The beast from the... Oh, we were in the sea. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. I skipped ahead. Revelation 13, beginning with verse 11. Then you go ahead and read. You're exactly the right place. I was wrong.
Then I saw another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and spoke like a dragon.
So he looked like a lamb, he looked peaceful, but what's coming out of his mouth is lies. Go on.
And he exercised all the authority of the first beast in his presence, and caused the earth to caused the earth and those who fell in it to worship the first beast. He did it when he was healed.
So there's a false prophet who is going to cause everybody to worship this beast as the Messiah. This either worship this nation and be aligned with this nation, or this person leading this nation. And this false Messiah is going to cause everybody to worship his image, it said. Now today we do worship images. Everybody walks around with the phone and we all get the same information at the same time. And somebody's image could appear on our phone and tell us stuff. And it's very easy because everybody's on their phones, on their computers. The whole world can get the same message at one time. We could all be looking at the same thing at the same time and the lie and believe the lie. And so we're going to worship. He's going to make sure that somehow we worship this false Messiah. Go on. And here is wisdom.
Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. His number is 666.
So again, there are 3 types of judgments. There are seals. There are 7 seals. The 6th seal, where the worst stuff happens, the 7th seal, God wins. There were 7 trumpets. The 6th trumpet is where the worst stuff happens and armies are occupying Israel and people are worshiping the beast. But in the 7th trumpet, the kingdom of the Lord comes. So he says to people, because when you're on this earth, during this time period, you're unlucky enough to be on the earth. We're all still alive when this happens. The entire world will be worshiping a false Messiah, and people will be put to death if they do not worship him. You won't be able to buy or sell or do anything unless you worship him, because he will have locked up, he and his system will have locked up all the commerce, and you can't go into a store unless you use his credit card, I mean, you know, whatever. And so it'll be the worst of times. But he says, here's wisdom. His number is only 6. 7 is coming.
Amen.
His number is 6, whether it's the 6th seal or the 6th trumpet or the 6th bowl that's coming up. His number is 6. It's 6. It's 6. It's not 7. So don't give up hope, because when the 7th seal is open, when the 7th trumpet sounds, then the kingdom of the Lord is coming. So this is normally taught that he literally is going to put 666 on people. But I believe that he's talking about numbers the whole time. The first, the second, the third, the fourth, the 6th. And that he hasn't changed. He's saying his number is 6. He only goes to 6. That's as far as he goes. Then I show up, Jesus says. He never makes it to 7. So hold on and persevere like the faithful church. Persevere so that you can make it to the end. Because his number is only 6. He can only go so far. It's going to look like he controls everything, but don't worry. 7 is coming. Jesus is coming. The Calvary is coming.
Amen.
Revelation chapter 14, the Lamb and the 144,000.
Then I looked, and behold, a lamb stood standing on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000.
144,000. So these Jews are going to begin to preach the gospel. The proclamation of the 3 angels, and then will be done. Then I saw another angel flying.
Then I saw another angel flying, having the everlasting gospel to preach to those who dwell on the earth. And another angel followed, saying, Babylon is fallen.
That Babylon is all those Jews, or even Christians, who worship the devil as opposed to worship the Messiah. He calls them Babylon. Go ahead.
Then a third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, If anyone worships the beast, he himself shall also drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out full strength into the cup of his indignation.
So it's going to be poured out full strength. Here's what's interesting. God's only been pouring out half strength. It's going to be poured out full strength, which means you're going to hell now. You thought syphilis was bad. Wait till you're on fire forever. Now, Revelation chapter 15, praying to the bowl judgments. These are the last set of 7 judgments.
And
I saw another sign in heaven, great and marvelous, 7 angels having the 7 last plagues. For in them the wrath of God is complete.
It's full. Go ahead.
Oh, it's full.
Yeah, that's what complete means. Go ahead.
Then one of the 4 living creatures gave to the 7 angels 7 golden bowls full of the wrath of God, who lives forever and ever. The temple was filled with smoke from the glory of God and from his power, and no one was able to the 7 plagues of the 7 angels.
So no one's going to be able to go into the kingdom of heaven until these 7 plagues are complete. So God's in his holy temple, and no one's going to be able to come in until these last 7 plagues are complete. And that's where we'll go from there. From chapter 15, we will go on to the rest of the book of Revelation. I just wanted to review halfway through so we can remember all the stuff. Because we've been learning a lot, and it's been like 20 weeks we've been on the book of Revelation and all the different visions. So I just wanted to review to remind us of what we've learned so we don't get lost. The last thing we're doing is the 7 plagues. And then we're going to talk about that last 3.5 years and how we'll be able to recognize the Antichrist, recognize the false Messiah, recognize his false prophets, so we aren't fooled along with everybody else. Okay. So are there any questions? Are we good? Thank you so much for coming to the class. So thank you. I appreciate it. You asked great questions.